stage, we have to hold the mics very close, and we have to share. Is that okay? Oh, that's good. Okay. So, I'm going to pull this off. So guys, again, you can get in line at any time. Don't be shy. Everybody come over here. Asking the question, I'll repeat it so everyone can hear it. Okay? So don't be shy. You can get in line now. I'll start the ball rolling. Steven. They do it. Right. I only gave them a little brief description of what happened, but you guys have known each other forever. Why don't you start the ball rolling and telling everybody how you guys lucked out and got to be characters in Return of the Jedi?
Well, Corey and I had a band. Corey played bass, I played guitar, and we met in the martial arts class together. And we were playing music a lot that summer, and Louie and Corey go in the summer with them to stand in. And Corey said, well, I was going to Arizona. I'm just going to do with them. Spend time with them, we play music at home in Los Angeles. And he asked me to do it well. And it was the set, and I went to play the Morning Guard.
Sweet. Now, who gave you the role? The producer?
We went to the dinner with Mr. Durant, and I said, thanks for everything, but can I do some work because I'm so bored in the desert.
And I think you owe some thanks to Mr. Williams as well, because if it wasn't for him, he wouldn't even be there.
Mr. Williams actually adopted me. He's like my second father.
Did Steven's check ever clear? Ask George Lucas. Okay. Corey, not only did you get to play Klaatu, but you got to do some stand-in work and some minimal stunt work for your dad. So why don't you tell the fans a little bit about how that all came into play for Return of the Jedi? Hold the mic close.
Well, over a period of about, I'd say 3 years, I delved into and stood in with my father in various movies and TV shows, and I believe Jedi was probably the first, I think it was probably the first job I had standing in for him. As I grew up and started to look more like him and less like my mother, they thought I would do good at standing for him. So basically when you're standing, they just use you to set up the shots and do all the stuff that needs to be done technically so that the actor can relax in his trailer where it's nice and cool. And then he comes out and does his thing. So I went there to stand in for him and to double him, basically, and then I ended up doing a stunt for him in one of the scenes where he falls over the side and he's hanging. I'm in a harness, basically dressed up like him, and I'm hanging in the harness, so he can stay comfortable and nice and cool somewhere while I eat sand. In a very, very uncomfortable harness, let me tell you, in 110-degree heat. But that's pretty much the reason I went there. And then they needed an extra body. There was a lot of injuries because there was a lot of stunts going on in the scene at one time. And so it was a really intense scene when you watch the movie. It goes by in maybe a few minutes, but it took 2 weeks to put that whole scene together. So, we were out there in the desert for a couple of weeks, and then they offered me the opportunity to do Klaatu, which was done mostly by me, but there was one other stunt guy who maybe did a couple of falls and a couple of little things here and there. But that's basically the short of it.
Sweet. And just so that you guys all know, well, actually both now, the action figures that are out there of Klaatu, where you see him on the skiff, it's not the other stunt guy, it actually is Corey. That is him. So that's sweet. And then the same thing with Steven. This is what the best thing with these guys is. All these, and I mean no offense to the Star Wars fans that are out there like my buddy Chris, who are diehards for all the people who are in the movie. These guys were lucky because of him. And because of him taking pictures on set with his camera, they've got pictures with their masks off so they can actually prove they were there. So I'm trying to make this as much of a making of Return of the Jedi as possible. So now on the making section, Billy, we get asked this a few times at conventions, but why don't we explain to these people what it was like to shoot the scenes in the Millennium Falcon? Because obviously it's not all real. So how did it work? How were you directed, and how realistic was it for you in the cockpit?
Of course, I guess everybody's heard of a blue screen or green screen. Sometimes it's blue, sometimes it's green. Yeah, well, it was blue screen. That sort of added to the Millennium Falcon, the actual ship that we happened to work in, to give you the feeling that it's moving in space and stuff like that. But I don't know. I was always fascinated by the whole experience. I was always fascinated particularly with the people who worked in the background, the people who put all of these things together, that created these objects that we had to work in. The same thing when I did the Batman series. When I saw Gotham City, I mean, I was really just amazed at the kind of craftsmanship that these guys have in creating these backdrops and scenes, buildings, and things of that nature. They don't get a lot of credit. You don't hear much about these guys, but they're pretty amazing. So, working in the Millennium Falcon was very interesting, and working with that character, Liam Num, was very interesting. But when you're doing these, you're working as an actor. You're trying to create a character. You're trying to, but at the same time, you're this real. You're like an observer. You're really fascinated by the whole experience. So it's a combination of things that go on with trying to be the actor, trying to do your job as the actor, but at the same time being totally, absolutely fascinated by all of the things that are being presented to you to work with. So it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. I feel very lucky to be a part of a situation like that.
And is it true, Billy, on some of those scenes in the Falcon that George was right off set telling you some of your lines?
Yeah, a lot of the lines that I had that George wrote, much of it was so nonsensical to me that I used to ask George to just throw the lines at me and I would repeat them and then, make some sense of it.
All right, so carrying on the making of Return of the Jedi, I'm going to ask all the panelists the same question. And I know it was 30 years ago, but it's not that hard. What was your most favorite memory from making Return of the Jedi? And it could be anything, something private with the fellow actors, a moment on set, anything. Take a minute to think about it. There's nobody in line yet. Do I have to do this all by myself? Chris, get up here and think of something. Good. Well, you still have to get up and think of something. Okay. Was that long enough? You got something, Stephen? We'll let you go first. Pass down the mic.
I think my favorite was the day we showed up. It was a Sunday, so the set was just hanging out by the pool in the back area. They had a hotel. I'm sorry. They had a hotel, and behind the hotel they had like these duplex condos, which we all stayed in. And the whole set and cast were there hanging out. So, like, Peter was in the hot tub, towering over me. I didn't know who he was at first. And it was just amazing to meet all those characters out of the costumes and actually see the attributes that go along with the characters. It was just brilliant how George kind of figured that all out somehow. You could actually see the people and picture them as the characters.
Well, let's see. Where do I start? There's so many moments, but and there's so many interesting things about it. But I think one of the most interesting things about it to me was when we first arrived there. They had these T-shirts printed up that said "Blue Harvest" across the front, and they had these hats that said "Blue Harvest." And when we got there, said, "What in the world's Blue Harvest? I thought we were coming here to do Star Wars, you know." And then they you know, kind of, you know, we don't want anybody to know we're here doing Star Wars because everybody will show up. I'm like, well, I'm thinking, well, good luck with that. You got Billy D. Williams, you got, you know, Mark Hamill, you got Harrison Ford. I mean, how is everybody not going to figure it out, you know? But so that was one of the funniest things I remember. And another thing was when we were out in the middle of the desert, after a few days, people started to figure out that something was going on. I mean, they had to compact sand to create a road to go out in the middle of the desert where the set was at, with a big fence around it. And so after a while, everybody discovered it was there, and they came out with ATVs and everybody with all kinds of vehicles. I mean, everybody wanted to see what was going on. And actually, the Marine Corps flew over the set in jets just to see what was going on. They buzzed the set, completely ruined the shot. You know, like, we got to do it over. Oh, okay. We couldn't hear anything, you know. And then we saw the same guys in the restaurant that night we went to eat. And we were sitting there with Dad and, you know, a couple of the other people, and they were like going, yeah, Blue Harvest, huh? So.
Yeah, well, that was quite an experience, that the Return of the Jedi. And, you know, working in that silent pit was not the easiest thing in the world. And in fact, I got one of the, what do they call those things? Slits? You know, when things that go off? Squid, yeah. A squid went off and went straight into my toe. And I was doing the scene with Harrison, and he was really getting into his character, and he was busy acting up a storm. And I'm like yelling, stop, you know, I got injured. But and that was a very interesting little moment. But my favorite moment, however, is going up against Darth Vader and surviving it. You know, for at least 3 seconds. I went up against him for about 3 seconds, and that was. But that to me was a major, you know, a small moment as it was a major moment, because nobody's ever survived, you know, those kinds of moments with Darth Vader. But and you know, whenever I get accused of betraying, Lando gets accused of betraying Han Solo, I always remind people, wait a minute, you know, remember, you know, I was trying to negotiate, but and I prevented the complete demise of Han and his friends. So anyway, that's one of my favorite little moments.
All right, so our first question from the audience, and I forgot to ask your name, sorry, but he wanted to know from each of you, it's a question for all three of you, on Return of the Jedi, either from the cast or from the crew, did you have one person who was your favorite to work with or that you really got along really well with, cast or crew? Take a few minutes. I still need people in line to ask more questions. Bring your friggin' chair with you, I don't care. Hey guys in the back, if you just got here, don't be shy. If you want to ask a question, we're competing with the wrestlers. Just come on up here, whisper the question to me, and we're going to ask the panelists. Okay, so that's enough banter for that. Steven, you want to go first with that next question?
Okay. Well, as you know, in the desert, with the sand blowing around, there was a lot of hours in between where the actresses hung out. And Kenny Baker would come and hang out with us all day. Corey and I and Billy, when he was working in the trailer. Just also Carrie Fisher would come around as Princess Leia, and that was pretty amazing. And it was pretty surreal, actually. But Kenny would sunbathe. And we have some pictures of him sunbathing and hanging out. And the stories are incredible. Also, Peter? Oh, Stuart was amazing. He had incredible stories to tell in his life.
Well, I would say probably the person that I remember the most would be a friend of ours called Julius LaFleur, who was like a big brother to me, and it was the first time we met him, and he was there to do stunts for my father, but also to do other stunts, and I was there to double him. And I remember when I walked up, and he told me the story, you know, after I met him and we talked a little bit. He said, you know, I thought my job was gone. As soon as I saw you walking up, and you looked exactly like your dad, he was going, I thought they were going to send me home. And but we became really, really good friends, and our friendship continued long after the movie was over. And I ended up doing stunts in other movies because he became a stunt coordinator as a result of all the work that he did in Jedi. And the only time I actually did a stunt for my father was when I actually hung over the side. It was actually Julius in the explosion. When the explosion happens and he goes over the side, that was Julius. Whereas Julius got hurt doing that one particular stunt. It was the first time he'd ever gotten injured. But the cable snapped that was across his hand and sliced his hand open, and because the guy that he was tussling with in the shot held on to him too long, and he landed on top of the guy and broke his leg. So the two of them just sort of, there was an airbag at the bottom that you would fall into when you fell in the Sarlacc pit, and the two of them just kind of fell into the bottom, and then we had to get him out of there and everything. But he was a really wonderful guy. He was a special person, and I think I remember that relationship with him probably the most out of meeting anyone, I would think.
Yeah, Julius was very special. He did a lot of stunts for me in a lot of movies that I did. But he was also a fireman. I think he just retired, as a matter of fact. But he was a pretty amazing person. I don't know what to say about. I mean, everybody that I worked with generally when I go into a situation, I just take in everything as much as I can, and I really have a good time. I'm not a person that likes conflict, and I always like a real smooth ride. I'd like to go in a situation and do my job, make my money, and go home. That's always been my attitude. So we were all friends, even contrary to a lot of the stories about me and Harrison not getting along. We got along very well. And even now when I see him, it's always a very amicable, very cordial kind of experience. And he's a wonderful man. I really, what really made me admire him a lot was when one day I was on my way to I think it was Hawaii, and he was at the airport with his two sons. And I always remembered his relationship with his two sons. And you really saw the closeness between him and his boys. And to me, that's a sign or an indication of a very good individual. So that was very special to me.
Now this is a good lead-in with that comment right there, Billy, and it's actually from the gentleman over here. He wanted to know from your point of view regarding your son. The 501st Legion just inducted Corey and Stephen into their honor system. You know, the 501st, the Star Wars fans, and they give you the plaques, right? The Rebel Legion. Sorry, you can shoot me later. They want to know what your reaction is to your son and Stephen being. What is your reaction to the fans reacting to them? Does that make sense? Are you proud of them at all?
Oh, this boy, he's both these are like, well, he's my son, my blood son, but he's my surrogate son. Is that right? Surrogate? Is that the right word? But Corey, you know, he and I have always had a very close relationship from the time he was born. You know, I felt like when he was born, I really felt like my best friend had just come, arrived. And we've always and will always have a wonderful relationship. Now, he stood up against me when he was 17 years old. You know, he was feeling his manhood. And he was studying karate at the time, so he was pretty proficient at it. And I said something to you. What did I say to you? I'm going to punch you in the mouth. Wasn't going to do it. But I thought he was going to back off, but he just stood there and was ready for me to bring it on. And so I had to think about that moment. I said, wait a minute, I love this boy, and I don't want anything to come between us, and it's something stupid, silly. And so I always want to remind him that, and it was my rationale for my acquiescing. You know, I thought, I always wanted to believe that I was the bigger person because I acquiesced. But I was.
I think you guys should go get in the ring right now. We'll start taking bets.
I didn't want to say to him that, you know, I knew, but the reality was that I knew that he would have kicked my butt. You know, because the guy, he was good. He was really good at what he was doing. He was studying with a master at that time. And then, you know, you start thinking, you know, when you have a son, you know, you think about, well, he's between being that kid, that adolescent, and going into his manhood, so he's feeling his oats. So you gotta, you know, as a father, you have to kind of make a real decision about that. But we've always managed to have a very, very, very close and very good relationship, and I'm very happy about that.
Awesome. All right. Making of Return of the Jedi. This is a very unique question. We've never heard this one before. Hopefully one of them will remember. For the fans who are out there, and you guys might need to pay attention as well. Jabba's sand barge, the big one, not the skiff, the big massive one. There are tons of pictures in books and stuff that show behind it that there appears to be like dressing rooms or waiting areas or things like that. We want to know if that is in fact what that is, and if so, how posh were the accommodations? Do you guys remember? Corey does. Okay, go ahead, Corey.
Yeah, I remember. There were trailers. They set up trailers down below the set. The set was actually, well, several stories off the ground. You know, the bottom of the set was actually probably about where the ceiling is. So they had semi-trucks stored underneath the set that had everything that they'd made in it. And like my father said, one of the things that was really fascinating is like most of the stuff that you see in the movie that looks really real is like made out of junk. Like they would just get parts from, you know, different car parts and different things and weld them together and combine them and make them look like whatever they wanted them to look like. And it was very realistic. But yeah, there was trailers that went all along the bottom end of that set and all along the back of it. And I wouldn't call the accommodations posh, but we were sure glad to get in from out of the 110-degree heat and away from some of the sand. I mean, at the end of the day, you were finding sand in places that you never thought you could get sand. I mean, you're pulling it out of your nose and your ears and everything else. I mean, we would have to like try to cover up, wear scarves or masks, and there was times where the wind would kick up, blow all the sand off the set, and then they'd have to get like a big pipe and pump sand back up onto the set again, and then rake it all out so we could start all over. So, and a few times the filming was completely postponed because there was a sandstorm would just kick up and we couldn't you know, sand and movie cameras and things like that don't really mix real well. You get sand in that stuff and it just doesn't work right. So they'd have to spend hours cleaning everything, and then we could start back up again, and they would not let us go back to the hotel. It's like, I guess, maybe 2 hours away or something from where we were staying. So we'd have to sit out there all day long, basically. And you'd start doing all kinds of things, singing to each other, whatever you can do to stay entertained. But that's basically it.
A question for Billy or Corey. There's an author,
L. Neil Smith.
L. Neil Smith, who wrote the Lando Calrissian novels, Star Wars. They're the extended universe. Have either of you read any of the Lando Calrissian books? No. Okay, that was simple. Sorry. Billy, how posh was your trailer on set? Did you have a bunch of chicks in there in bathing suits and a lot of tequila? What?
No such luck.
No such luck? Damn.
I don't even remember. Tell you the truth, I really don't really remember very much about the accommodations.
Uh,
It was 30 years ago, I know. I told people not to ask that, and I did, see, so.
I don't know. It's funny. I just never think about it. It was all great fun. And in England, I spent maybe 4 or 5 months in England shooting both movies, and we had decent dressing rooms. And, the only thing I really kind of remember about England, though, was they like to have their little tea sandwiches, and the tea sandwiches were. I kept looking for what was between the 2 pieces of bread, but I always thought that was a little bit fascinating. But it was pretty much of a ritual, a traditional kind of thing. But I just found it very interesting.
All right, this question is for Lando, Billy. Sorry, it's because he said that. It's our favorite question, Billy. Why at the end of The Empire Strikes Back were you wearing Han Solo's clothes? Do you remember the answer we came up with?
You tell it. He's the one he's got the best answer.
Okay.
I think there are about 3 answers.
Well, there was 3 answers, but we have 2 good ones. The first one is that Lando owned the Millennium Falcon originally, so it's actually Han that stole his clothes out of the closet from the Falcon. And then the more nasty version that Billy came up with was...
They were lovers.
And Princess Leia came knocking on the door and Han went, shit! I put on the wrong clothes. I mean, he went, darn, there are kids in the audience. Man. Does that answer your question, sir? Fantastic. The young lady who was up here, this is for all 3 of you. And Billy, it could be from either Empire or Jedi if you wish, but we want to keep Star Wars theme. What was your favorite scene to shoot? Favorite scene to shoot? Take a minute, take a minute, take a minute. You got another one? Nice. Oh, okay. Here, you've been given a job by the cast. Don't be shy. Get up there.
My favorite moment, I suppose, when I was introduced in The Empire Strikes Back. I mean, for me, the cape really became a real defining moment for the character. I mean, the whole idea of wearing a cape and having wind blow and cape flying was a real swashbuckling moment for me. So that was certainly one of my seminal moments in the experience.
Corey? Well, I know you had like 30
I was only in one scene, so that's easy. That was my favorite one.
Still on. Oh, and Steven, your favorite
Obviously, on the skiff, of course.
scene? Is it the one where Luke kills you?
Yes, I'm very proud of that.
I had to stretch on that one.
You know what?
I had to stretch on that one.
Oh, you did?
Yeah, yeah. Okay, while he whispers sweet nothings in my ear, I'm going to ask them a question to keep the banter going. Aside from the making of Return of the Jedi, obviously our esteemed guest, Mr. Williams, has been in movies for years, 50 plus years. He's an icon in Hollywood. He's made tons and tons of movies. We all know him as an actor, but a lot of people don't realize he's also an artist. He would even say he's an artist first sometimes. You guys need to check out his website, bdwworldart.com. You can see a lot of the stuff that he does. But Billy, could you share with the audience, I know you won and you've won and have been nominated for some of your art, some awards you've been won and could you fill people in on your art? I can't talk today, I'm sorry.
I'm just fascinated, this little boy. He's in one position. He's fast asleep. He hasn't moved from that position all through this whole banter. They're beautiful kids. Yeah, well, I as a painter, you know, I grew up in New York City, and I went to a school called Music and Art High School where I majored in art. And from Music and Art, I went to I got a scholarship to a school called the National Academy of Design for the Fine Arts, where I spent 2 years on the scholarship and I was nominated for a Guggenheim when I was 18, 19 years old, and I won a Hallmark, which is comparable to a Guggenheim. But I also have a painting, Smithsonian owns one of my paintings, the Schoenberg in New York and the Kansas City Jazz Museum owns one of my paintings. So, and I've been exhibiting for quite a few years. And in fact, I have now some paintings up in Toronto at a gallery there, the Brian List Gallery. But painting has been very much a part of my life, a real passion most of my life. But now my son is amazing. He does, besides being a trainer and a nutritionist, he does amazing work as far as interior design is concerned. I mean, absolutely. And I don't just say this because he's my son, but I've seen what he does. He is absolutely amazing.
Okay, Billy, since you have the mic, we're going to give you the next.
What a great musician. Both these guys. I was just listening to some real great stuff that they're putting together. Steve plays the guitar, Corey plays the bass, and they had a band together when they were teenagers, and it was pretty spectacular stuff that they were doing at that time. They were doing what they call fusion music, and but Corey, you're a pretty amazing person. You really are. I have to say that about my little boy.
All right, Billy, while you have the mic, this is a question directly for you. How did you get the role of Lando Calrissian?
Herb Kirchner came to my house. They asked me, at that time I was really gaining a lot of popularity in movies. And after I did Brian's Song, I was nominated for an Emmy. And then I did those movies with Diana Ross, Lady Sings the Blues, and Mahogany. And things were going along very well. So the Lucas Company asked me to participate in the movie. So I had a meeting with Herb Kirchner, who's probably one of the most amazing individuals I've ever met in my life. And we both can attest to that. He would be really missed. But Herb, he came to my house and we sat down and we talked for a long time. We talked about a lot of things. And, you know, I had been very much interested in, involved in Eastern philosophy. And Kirchner was very much involved with Eastern philosophy and Buddhism. And so we established a really good rapport with each other. So that's how it all really began.
All right, so this is something for you guys to think over. It's going to be a politically correct answer that you're going to need to give, so mull it over. We had a question from one of the people in the audience. Who was the most fun on set to party with at the end of the day? And watch what you say. And while you mull it over, there was another question that I'll let you guys know. It was for Billy, but Billy actually never saw this version of the script. The question was, is it true that the Millennium Falcon was supposed to blow up in the Death Star? And Billy actually never got that script. The script that Billy got was the right one. There is only one version of the script, and it's an early one that, yes, that is true, but it was changed very quickly. So it was never intended, it was never storyboarded that Lando was going to die. So does that answer your question? Where is he? Yes, somewhere? Yes, okay. Oh, he's right there, okay. So now they're going to answer this question, and then guys, I'm sorry, I should have said something before. We're going to wrap it up, but don't be shy. You can come to their table and ask them anything you want to know, okay? Almost. Okay, guys, are you ready? Do you got a PC answer here?
I'll take this one. Well, I guess everybody was kind of fun in general because, you know, you're out there in the middle of the desert. It's just us. We're pretty isolated from everyone else, so we don't have anybody else to party with but each other, basically. But so it's like the cast and the crew, and we got really close to a lot of the crew members, and a lot of them lived there in the town, and they were really cool to hang out with. But I think the most memorable thing that used to happen is that since Steven and I were in a band together, we decided we were going to bring instruments with us because when my father said, you know, you guys want to come to Yuma, Arizona for 2 weeks and do Star Wars? And we were like, well, I don't know about it. We'd rather stay here and jam, you know. But we said, okay, yeah, let's do it. But let's bring our axes with us. So Steve brought his guitar, brought my bass, and we had a little amp or whatever we had in the hotel room. And word got out that we would jam in our hotel room at night. And so people would start coming and knocking on the door. You guys jamming tonight? So it was like we had like a little nightclub going in our hotel room where everybody would show up and listen to us jam and bring beer or whatever else they wanted to bring. You know, it was kind of crazy, but it was fun.
Best 2 weeks of their lives. Everybody can follow Steven on Facebook, correct? Steven Costantino. Everybody can follow Corey on Facebook. Corey.
And at CoreyDWilliams.com.
CoreyDWilliams.com. And if you guys want to follow Mr. Billy D. Williams on Twitter, it's RealBDW, right? RealBDW on Twitter. No. It's RealBDW. I'm almost positive. Right. And then they can follow me on Derek Mackey. And we finally have a Facebook page for Billy D. Williams that you guys can follow as well. There'll be updates on appearances and stuff. So please go follow all of us if you want. And thank you for being so attentive. I'm sorry that we're competing with them, but you guys are about to show them what a real crowd is all about. Give it up for Steven, Corey,